Hello my soccer universe, for the final Serie A video of the 24-25 season, and despite them having a rotten season, I'm wearing Milan because Milan will be a focus in this video. But what I want to do in this video is go a little bit more informal overall, let you know about my personal opinions as well. I want to first talk about the promotion picture, then we will summarize the entire season, you know, who ended up where, who will be in Europe, where will they enter the competition, and so on and so forth. Although for Italy that's relatively easy. Then I also want to try to crown a relative winner. Who exceeded their expectations the most based on the pre-season expectations? You know, at the beginning of the season I always publish a table where I run my model. All the results are set to 0, current rating, how many points are expected, and now we know how many points they got, so who exceeded those the most. Then I definitely want to talk about Milan, where the club is going, and also talk about some really big names being rotated in and out of their current jobs, coaching their respective teams. Some of them already decided, some of them are for now a rumor, but a very founded rumor, and I think that should cap a rather fun video. So I would say, let's start with the promotion picture from Serie B. As always, the Serie B promotion picture is rather convoluted, and yes, at least one big name is missing here, Sampdoria, who actually got relegated, but there might be a chance that they may stay in because the Brescia owner, I also don't want to get necessarily Brescia relegated, there's some financial troubles, they might be docked 4 points, so Sampdoria might play against Salernitana for survival in Serie B. However, that's still to be decided, and you know, in Italy those things take a while. A while it also takes to find the third team to get promoted and join Sassuolo, who won Serie B at a canter, and Pisa, who make their return. And I'm quite excited about them returning to Serie A. Especially, I already imagine the shots from the stadium going to the Leaning Tower, which is really not that far from there. If you're in Pisa, the stadium is almost right next to the Leaning Tower. So that's pretty exciting. So, Pisa is back. Who will join them? We had then Catanzaro, a team from the south, but a rather traditional team, taking on Cesena at home, beating them 1-0, and Juve Stabia from the Naples region, beating Palermo, who was the big name, but Palermo at the moment are a little bit of a mess. So that went into two-legged semi-finals, where Spezia then ousted Catanzaro 4-1 on aggregate, and Cremonese lost at Stabia 2-1, however beat them 3-0 at home to set up the final against Spezia, the first leg, and with a 0-0 draw. And then Cremonese had a huge 3-0 lead in the 80th minute before Esposito and Vignali pulled 2 back rather quickly. I think a draw would have seen Spezia through, as they were the higher ranked team, and that's the rule in Serie B. There would be no overtime otherwise, so if it scores a level, the higher ranked team will advance, which I think is an interesting concept, I have to say. But Cremonese, hold on, Cremonese are in Serie A next season. I think they got relegated 2 seasons ago, if I'm not completely off, but you know, they were recently in Serie A. And so, Sassuolo, Pisa and Cremonese will replace Monza, Venezia and Empoli. Venezia back immediately after only 1 season. Monza, complete disaster season, are now down after I think 3 seasons where we really thought they might actually push a little bit further. I guess the death of Berlusconi did them a dirty there. And Empoli is anyway a team that was always hanging in there, have a very well run team that I would expect to bounce back and come back into Serie A. Now, going on the top, we have of course league champions Napoli going into the Champions League phase. Only 4 spots in the Champions League for Italy this season. All of them go of course in the league phase. Napoli winning the championship. I have to say, a rather messy championship. No team really seemed imperious. It was more a classic fight that we saw in earlier times. No super team. And yes, it was a head-to-head between them and Inter, but at times those teams were really reeling and dropping points left or right. So while Napoli will not care, they celebrate this championship, it was overall, I would say, a rather meh title race. And just to illustrate how tight it was, and maybe one could pick out many instances, if Inter in the second to last game of the season don't give away the stupid penalty that allows Pedro to equalize, or if Arnautovic gets his feet sorted, Inter might be champions right now. It was that tight, but Napoli see it out. Atalanta were for a while in a title race, but again, they cannot beat Inter, and that really hurts Atalanta. However, again, a third place finish as the final act of Gasperini, we know now he's leaving, is a really credible result. Juve, yes, there were many qualms about Juve, how bad their season was. However, they get the job done, unlike other big teams. Juve are in the Champions League, which was a much needed financial injection for them. Roma almost made in the Champions League. It's the story of the season. They had a bad start to the season, but they sacked De Rossi way too early. Juric takes over, and Roma are teetering on the relegation zone, on the edge there. Ranieri takes over, and they go on a winning streak and almost make it back into the Champions League. It is probably the coaching job of the season for me. Bologna, while being in the race for the Champions League for quite a while, in the end it was then all clear that they will go for the Coppa Italia, which they win against Milan, adding more insult to injury on Milan's season, and thus they're also in the Europa League phase, and I think it's a competition that will suit them much more than, for instance, the Champions League did last season. And on the last day of the season, Fiorentina, Pip, Lazio. Those two teams were actually really good. They both had really good spells. Lazio seemed also to be in the title race, at least in the Champions League race, for a long time. That they miss out on Europe altogether was actually a disaster. And Baroni actually, I think he stepped down. He was not necessarily fired. But yeah, that's a little bit of a downer for Lazio, who did not have that many great expectations ahead of the season, but at least in the fall, they were one of the best teams in Serie A. As was Fiorentina. Slow start, then a real run. In the end, they make it back into Europe, into their favorite competition, the Conference League. Which also means that Milan, the biggest name of them all, missing out on any European action. Absolute disaster, but maybe a good time for a rebuild. That much is for certain. So, when we went through this summary, you also saw on the red side that I had already up there the points that the teams got, and then pre-match, and there was the little bar. So let's sort this, and who is the most overachieving team? It is Napoli, of course. Napoli finished 10th last season. After winning the title, now they win the title again. It's a rather ping-pong pattern, but Napoli were the overachievers. Fiorentina also among the overachievers, and of course Como, promoted side, but we knew they have a lot of financial might, that they might do well. But they had a slow start, but then Fabregas turned it around. Bologna, Atalanta joining the top 5, and I want to make a shout out to Lazio. Yes, the season ends in disappointment, but overall it was actually a good season. I think Lazio will feel that, however they will feel empty-handed, because for all the good stuff you didn't get much. It's a cruel business, especially when you have a team that finishes behind you winning the Coppa Italia. On the bottom, we have Juve just missing out on the bottom 5. Torino are in there. Torino is for me one of those teams that just disappoints and disappoints and disappoints. I always feel this is a team that could do so much better. They could rival Fiorentina, for instance. They have the clout historically. However, they never quite manage. Venezia, too many draws. Venezia really played well enough, and this is Di Francesco to a T. Di Francesco always creates teams that play nice football in Serie A, however, always battling against relegation, and then in the end they just miss out by a hair, and it was this time again. Empoli, great start to the season. After a few rounds, we thought Empoli will potentially even could push for Europe. I mean, it was never really there, to be honest. But then it all fell down and Empoli relegated. Milan, we'll talk about Milan in a second. A really disappointing season. Well, you got one title, but the Supercoppa, I don't really count. I only count it because we beat Inter and Monza. Yeah, well, worst team in Serie A by a mile. Of course, the bottom. So, with Milan now, even mathematically confirmed, having a rotten season. We didn't need mathematics for that. It was a rotten season for Milan. They always had the hope for some salvation by winning the Coppa Italia, but that flat performance literally cost Conceição his job. I think he would have gone anyway. And then the big upheaval came already. So, Sergio Conceição, they made at least a smart contract to only give him 6 months. I honestly would have liked to give him a little bit more time. However, there's no time at Milan. Everything is in disarray. The fans are unhappy with the ownership, want the ownership gone. I want the ownership gone, to be honest. Maldini needs to be reinstated in some sort of fashion. That he's a non-entity at the club at the moment just does not feel right. And the leadership over the last 2 seasons on top did not work out. Yes, there were some great transfers in it. Tijani Reinders is a great transfer that they made. Christian Pulisic, a great transfer, but there are many flops in there. I mean, Emerson Royal, anyone. That we sell now Tijani Reinders most likely to Manchester City is on the one side a good move for Reinders, who showed that he was a great player, but it's a big loss for Milan, honestly. So I'm actually quite sad to see him go. Ricci is supposed to replace him. Yes, more Italian talent from Torino. Maybe this will hurt Torino even more, but for a Milan perspective, yes, you need to get more Italian players in. Now, the big upheaval up top in the sporting leadership was, of course, they hired finally a sporting director, and I really didn't want Paratici to come in. There's too much baggage there, so I'm actually quite alright with Iglitare. I know he's not the big name that maybe someone would have hoped for. However, as he says in his opening interviews, he's Milan through and through, and he's done a good job at Lazio. So I actually think that might actually be a good appointment. I'm not so happy with the replacement for Conceição in Massimo Allegri. Don't get me wrong. Allegri, when he first came to Milan, was the right appointment. A young upstart manager who worked well at Cagliari and then got the Scudetto and probably should have won a second one as well. That they threw this away to Conte's Juve is still one that really hurts me. But then on the next season, when Berlusconi already sold off players, finishing in the third place was one of the best coaching jobs that Allegri has done. So I don't begrudge Allegri per se. However, to me, Allegri is a little bit an old-fashioned hire. And Milan always did the best when they took a young coaching talent, put him on the helm, and created something from there. Look at Sacchi, look at Capello, look at Ancelotti, even look at Allegri himself. Those were the most successful managers. Pioli is an outlier there. So for me, it's going a bit against the grain of Milan. I also didn't like what he did with Juve as of late. Ultra defensive, although I think Allegri can play better. And in his first stint at Milan at times played some really great stuff. So I have some hope that we go back there. What definitely is gone is that this will not be the Red Bull model, if you like, where you get a lot of young players. Allegri doesn't like young players. He likes really well-rounded players to build something. And I have to say, at the moment, I don't really feel this appointment. I want to give him a chance to show something different, to build something. However, I am hugely skeptical, to say the least. But Milan needs a restart. Having now only one game a week, because you don't have Europe, should be a huge chance to go also out on a Scudetto run. And I know we just finished in 8th place, but Scudetto run has to be in there, because you have no distractions. Let's see how many players you will keep, but I can only see Inter and Juve already at the Club World Cup. They probably will be tired. Inter probably have already thrown away the start of the season because of that, and it feels like Inter are on a turn after losing this Champions League final, and that's all I'm gonna say again. I really don't wanna pounce on Inter, but let me say it again. When Milan is part of a huge scoreline in a Champions League final, Milan are winning that one. When Inter is part of a huge scoreline in the Champions League final, Inter are being beaten. And yes, I'm aware that Milan has probably one of the most painful losses in Champions League history, but they were well in the game, at least that we can say, and they will live on forever in that memory just for that. But yeah, cautiously optimistic as always. However, I really don't feel that appointment to cap it all off. Now let's talk about coaching hires. I mean, Allegri at Milan is already a big one, but there seems to be that every top team is losing their manager at the moment. One team though that will not lose their manager is Antonio Conte, who will stay on. He was promised a huge budget. Let's see if it's really 150 million. I cannot really see Napoli doing that. However, they will get De Bruyne and probably Jonathan David. So maybe that sounds quite right, and I think De Laurentiis really could not afford losing another championship winning coach. However, Conte in Europe doesn't really do that well. Let's see about that. Inter seemed like this is a project that will go on. However, Inzaghi is making rumors that he might be out. And yeah, there will be an announcement made right after I shoot this video. So we'll see about that. Gasperini leaving Atalanta. He will probably join Roma. What a heel turn that is. Atalanta and Roma don't like each other. And I don't think if Gasperini is the right appointment for Roma, although if it works out, I think it's great news for Roma fans. However, I don't quite see it. Juventus sticking now for Tudor. They were actually hoping for Conte, but Juve are kind of now with bound hands. Maybe they have to go for another young coach. One of those is Palladino, who was now let go by Fiorentina, or Baroni, who stepped down at Lazio, with Sarri coming back. I mean, Sarri worked well at Lazio, and that he stepped down was a little bit of a surprise, but it's again one of those. And who knows if Italiano will stay at Bologna? I really do hope so, but it's never boring in Serie A, and the carousel at the coaching level will continue. No stability. I mean, it doesn't make much sense from a sporting side of view. On the other side, it's a whole lot of fun to talk about. So this ends my coverage of the 24-25 Serie A season. As I said in other videos, I probably will continue with Serie A, but I don't know how much of a Milan focus I actually will put on that. I know that I cannot continue in the way that I've been doing it this season, but my Serie A videos will continue because this is the league I watch the most and I follow the most, but it might happen in a slightly different way. In any case, please let me know your thoughts on this season, especially if you're a Milan fan like me. How did you like that? Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like these, and I'll talk to you soon with more things in my soccer universe. Bye! Hey there! I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, here are some videos and playlists that you may enjoy too. Also, please consider subscribing to my channel and hit the little bell icon so you get notified whenever something happens in my soccer universe. And with that, have a wonderful day. Bye!